Richard Mach, Suzanne has taken a very personal view of this. Do you think there is maybe a more practical or political aspect to this problem as well?
Well, the question last week was about what kind of societal fixes there might be. And I think if we look at the changes in the distribution of wealth in America over the last 10 years, the finger points rather strongly at what has happened and along the political spectrum that has impacted homelessness as we see it today and the powerlessness. When someone becomes homeless, they drop into some sort of black hole, and it must be absolutely terrifying. And do they ever come out of that black hole? Can they ever get out of that black hole? They have an impoverished, at that point, they are impoverished in terms of their political impact. We would like, many people I believe would like to sweep that under the rug, and it's probably one of the easiest things to sweep under the rug because of the ability of all of us to defend against seeing things that we don't want to see. So I feel that there's a very, very strong, and this is in contradistinction to what many others have said today, I feel that there's a very, very strong political component here that has been not addressed and is very systematically avoided by at the network levels and beyond, with most of the media that is part of the power structure in the United States. It's simply being avoided altogether. And we're headed very rapidly to some painful times ahead in America as a whole.
But you know, there's the problem of unforeseen consequences, and I think much of what we're dealing here are the unforeseen consequences of what were seen once as very progressive reforms. Changes in laws relating to divorce, changes in laws relating to institutionalizing the mentally ill, obviously economic changes as the huge market for highly paid unskilled labor has disappeared, and there once were many good jobs for unskilled people in this country, and they are rapidly disappearing, and nowhere is that more evident than here in the city of Flint, where I can remember when I was in school, there was a general sense that, oh, you didn't have to work. You could always get a job in the shop, you know. You didn't have to, study. You didn't have to get good grades, because you could always get a job in the shop. And if you were in the shop, you'd be making, well, today the equivalent of something around $40,000 to $50,000 a year, and a lot more with overtime and benefits. You know, I mean, it was good. It was a good job for an unskilled labor, and yet here we are in a situation where we're dealing with consequences that nobody anticipated would happen.
Earlier, we spoke about why is it that some people rise out of the ashes and make something of their world after they've been struck down in this very powerful way, and why some others don't. My response to that, in response to what you've just said, is that in this area, there's two profoundly negative impacts on being independent. One has been the social service kind of notion, which has gone beyond just protection and has missed the boat in some levels, and I won't address that because it's pretty apparent what that's about. But the other issue that is not addressed, and I've seen again and again in my 10 years in this city, is that we have had such a centralized power of who has employed most of the workers here that dependency has very wonderfully been orchestrated over the years to keep people dependent on the company and not independent to their own resources. What has happened as a result is when they find themselves out in the street, and I've worked with these people again and again, they believe somebody will come and save them. They have no personal resources. Many of them have been the third generation that has worked for the company. And so they are the people that drop right out of sight.
And I think it's like we talk about welfare dependency, people who have been on welfare for generations. Do you think somebody whose family maybe was employed by the corporation and came to look at that as more or less of a given? I think one of our recent guests was Ben Hamper on this show, and Ben talks about that, how he just grew up in his family assuming, of course, he was going to go to work in the plant, and you didn't have to do anything, you just got in. And what a disruption that was. Now, Ben happens to be a very gifted person and has done very well as a writer. But at the same time, one could say even Ben isn't, employed properly or something. But do you think that there's that same sort of dependency that some people talk about a welfare dependency? There is actually a sort of corporate dependency in places like Flint and maybe the Detroit area that have been so focused.
That's what I was saying. There is absolutely no question about it, and it's quite an insidious thing. And it's most of all, it's insidious because there's such a sense over the years, an awareness that has come to me that there's some sort of an orchestration that if you keep people dependent, they cannot leave those kinds of menial labor and unskilled jobs. And there are a lot of very, very unhappy people that were until a few years ago, that were making a lot of money. And the money was, and benefits were holding them in jobs in which they were enormously, personally and spiritually under-realized. So there was a lot of dissatisfaction. One of the things that's dropping out is as that company moves away from this area, that the diversity is going to increase, and that's going to inure us against the difficulties that might be ahead in this country as a whole. So again, I say this: we are not behind the 8 ball in Flint, Michigan. We're ahead of the 8 ball, and we have been compelled to go there. And because we see all these gifted people, not only here, but out on the streets as well, making a life for themselves in the middle of the shambles that we see around us.
That's a very interesting perspective, and I think very useful.